The wind howled, sending shivers down their spines as it rustled through the trees, creating an eerie symphony of whispers and creaks. Rain lashed against the windows, each drop sounding like a tiny hammer, adding to the sense of foreboding that hung in the air. It was Halloween night, the time for tricks and treats, when the boundary between the living and the dead seemed to blur, and the air was thick with the scent of pumpkins and the thrill of the unknown. But for a group of friends, this Halloween was about to become a nightmare, a test of courage that none of them would ever forget. They dared to enter Blackrock Manor, the haunted house on the hill, a place shrouded in mystery and whispered legends of ghosts and ghouls. "Are you sure about this?" whispered Jessica, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement, her eyes wide as she glanced at the looming structure. "Don't be scared," said Jake, trying to sound brave, though his own heart pounded in his chest like a drum. "It's just an old house." The house stood silent and empty, its dark windows like eyes watching their every move, the air inside thick with the scent of decay and forgotten memories. The others, Emily and Ben, were silent. They were scared too, their faces pale and their breaths shallow, but they didn't want to show it. But nobody wanted to back out. Not after the dare. They had to prove their bravery, to themselves and to each other. They stood at the foot of the hill, the ominous silhouette of Blackrock Manor looming above them like a dark sentinel, its presence both inviting and terrifying. The old iron gate creaked open as if inviting them in, the sound echoing in the still night, a chilling reminder that there was no turning back now. With hesitant steps, they began their ascent up the hill, each step feeling heavier than the last, their hearts pounding louder with every inch they drew closer to the manor. Jake reached out and pushed open the creaky door, the sound of the hinges like a scream in the silence, and they stepped inside, swallowed by the darkness. Inside, the air was cold and musty, filled with the scent of dust and decay. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly drapes, and the furniture was covered in a thick layer of dust untouched for years. They huddled together, their eyes darting around nervously, every creak and groan of the old house making their hearts race. The dare had brought them here, but now they had to face whatever awaited them in the shadows. A flickering candle cast eerie shadows on the walls, the light dancing and creating shapes that seemed to move and shift, playing tricks on their minds. They moved cautiously through the house, each room revealing more of its dark secrets, the atmosphere growing heavier with each step. The dare had become a journey into the unknown, a test of their courage and their friendship. Fear was etched on their faces, but they pressed on, determined to see the dare through to the end, no matter what horrors awaited them in the darkness of Blackrock Manor. Blackrock Manor had been empty for decades. Its once grand facade now crumbled and overgrown, a mere shadow of its former glory. The windows, shattered and dark, seemed to hold secrets of a bygone era, whispering tales of sorrow and mystery to those who dared to listen. Legends whispered about the family who once lived there, about their sudden disappearance and the eerie silence that followed. The portraits of the family, now covered in dust, stared back with hollow eyes as if trying to tell their own story. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about strange lights and sounds coming from the house. Flickering lights that seemed to dance in the windows, and unearthly sounds that echoed through the night, sending shivers down the spines of those who heard them. Some said the house was cursed, a place where misfortune befell anyone who dared to enter. The very air around it seemed thick with a malevolent presence, a warning to stay away. Others said it was haunted by the ghosts of the family, their restless spirits trapped within its walls. On moonlit nights, ghostly figures were said to appear in the windows, their faces twisted in eternal anguish. As the friends made their way up the overgrown path, the air grew colder, and the once vibrant garden now lay in ruins, overtaken by nature. Each step they took seemed to echo with the memories of the past. They felt a cold dread creep into their hearts, a sense of foreboding that grew stronger with every passing moment. The closer they got to the house, the more palpable the fear became. The wind seemed to whisper their names, carrying with it the voices of the past. It was as if the very elements were warning them to turn back, to leave this place of sorrow and despair. The trees swayed as if alive, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. What was that? A question that hung in the air, unanswered and unsettling. Emily gasped, clutching Ben's arm tightly. Her eyes wide with fear, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The sense of being watched was overwhelming. A twig snapped in the darkness, breaking the silence and sending a jolt of fear through the group. They froze, straining to see what lurked in the shadows. Something moved in the shadows, a dark shape that seemed to glide effortlessly through the night. Was it a ghost or something far more sinister? The friends could only hold their breath and hope for the best. Jake, the oldest of the group, tried to stay calm. His heart pounded in his chest, but he knew he had to keep his composure. The others looked up to him, and he couldn't afford to show any sign of weakness. He was the one who had suggested they explore the house. It had seemed like a thrilling adventure at first, a way to prove their bravery and bond as friends. But now, standing in front of the ominous Blackrock Manor, he wasn't so sure. Now, he wished he hadn't. The stories about the house being haunted suddenly felt all too real. He could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. But there was no turning back now. But he couldn't show his fear. He had to be the rock for his friends, the one they could rely on. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Not in front of the others. They were all counting on him to lead the way. He glanced at his friends, seeing the mix of anxiety and anticipation in their eyes. Jessica, her eyes wide with fear, clung to Jake's arm. She had always been the timid one, easily scared. But she trusted Jake. She believed he would keep them safe no matter what. She had always been the timid one, easily scared. But she trusted Jake. She believed he would keep them safe no matter what. Her grip on his arm tightened as they approached the door. Emily and Ben, hand in hand, stayed close behind. They were both excited and terrified at the thought of what they might find inside the house. The thrill of the unknown was exhilarating, but the fear of the supernatural was palpable. They were both excited and terrified at the thought of what they might find inside the house. The thrill of the unknown was exhilarating, but the fear of the supernatural was palpable. They exchanged nervous glances, trying to muster the courage to continue. Taking a deep breath, Jake pushed open the creaking door of Blackrock Manor. The sound echoed through the night, sending shivers down their spines. The darkness inside seemed to swallow the light from their flashlights, making the house feel even more foreboding. As they stepped inside, the air grew colder, and the musty smell of decay filled their nostrils. The floorboards creaked under their feet, adding to the eerie atmosphere. They huddled together, their flashlights casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence, making them jump at the slightest noise. The house felt alive, as if it were watching them, waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets. They moved cautiously, their eyes darting around, trying to take in every detail. Jake led the way, his determination unwavering despite the fear gnawing at him. He knew they had to stick together and stay strong. This was their adventure, and they would face it head-on, no matter what lay ahead. The air inside was heavy, stale and cold. It smelled of decay and dust. Cobwebs hung from every corner, and the only light came from the moonbeams filtering through the grimy windows. The floorboards groaned under their weight as they stepped inside. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind them with a loud bang echoing through the empty house. Jessica screamed. "It's just the wind," said Ben, his voice shaky. But deep down they all felt it, the presence of something else within the walls of Blackrock Manor. They moved cautiously through the house, their hearts pounding in their chests. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind in the chimney sent shivers down their spines. "Did you hear that?" whispered Emily, her eyes wide with fear. A faint whisper seemed to come from the end of the hallway. "Hello!" called out Jake, his voice echoing in the silence. The only reply was the sound of their own breathing. They entered a room with a grand fireplace and a dusty chandelier hanging precariously from the ceiling. On the wall above the fireplace hung a large, faded portrait of a man in a somber black suit. His eyes seemed to follow them as they moved. "Creepy," muttered Ben. As they turned to leave, Jessica gasped, "The portrait, it's gone!" The space where the portrait had hung was empty. Section 7. Don't look back. They ran, their fear propelling them through the dark corridors of the house. They didn't know what they were running from, but they knew they had to get out. "This way!" shouted Jake, leading them down a narrow staircase. As they reached the bottom, they heard a blood-curdling scream echoing from the floor above. "Jessica!" cried Emily. Without hesitation, Jake turned back and ran up the stairs with Ben and Emily close behind. Section 8. The secret room. They found Jessica at the end of a long hallway, cowering in front of a secret door that had been hidden behind a tapestry. "What is it?" asked Ben, his voice trembling. Jessica pointed a shaking finger at the door. I saw him," she stammered. "The man from the portrait. He went in there." With a deep breath, Jake pushed the door open. Section 9. The Ghost's Touch. The room was small and dusty, lit by a single flickering candle. In the center of the room stood a wooden table with an old book lying open on it. As they stepped closer, the candle flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. At the same moment, they felt an icy cold hand brush against their skin. A terrifying scream ripped through the silence. Section 10. Trapped! They fumbled for the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. They were trapped. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe. They could hear the sound of their own hearts pounding in their chests. Then a voice, cold and hollow, echoed around them. "You should not have come here," it whispered. "Now you will never leave." The teenagers huddled together, fear gripping them like a vice. They had entered Blackrock Manor on a dare. Now they were trapped at the mercy of whatever haunted its halls.